My name is Rebecca Hayes, and for all of my 36 years, I've been the designated failure in my family. The funny thing is, while my mother, Eleanor, showed off my sister Chloe as her prized possession, I was quietly becoming the youngest governor in the history of Northwood. For years, I kept this part of my life a complete secret from them, sidestepping the casual dismissals and sharp critiques that had been the soundtrack to my upbringing. And that strategy worked flawlessly, right up until that afternoon in a crowded courtroom when Judge Sterling looked straight at me and uttered the words that blew my world apart. Governor Hayes. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us today. Before I get to how my entire family found out about my secret in the most public way imaginable, do me a favor and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you love a good family drama. I was raised in a tidy suburb just outside of Chicago, in a 2-story house with a lawn so perfect my mother, Eleanor, would have a fit if a single blade of grass was out of place. Our house looked like a postcard from the outside, but inside it ran on an unspoken pecking order that put my sister Chloe on a pedestal and me, well, somewhere near the bottom. Eleanor Hayes was a woman driven by appearances and social standing. She was the kind of person who wore designer outfits to the grocery store and made it her business to know every influential person in town. Her laughter was a performance, her smiles were calculated, and her whole existence was a carefully orchestrated play to project an image of absolute perfection. What other people thought of our family was her ultimate concern. My sister Chloe was 3 years younger, but we might as well have been from different galaxies. She got my mother's bright green eyes, her effortlessly blonde hair, and a natural charm that could disarm anyone. At 5, she was the star of local talent shows. By 13, she was the queen bee of her middle school. Chloe could talk anyone, especially our parents, into getting her anything she desired. She was vibrant, captivating, and the undeniable center of gravity in every room she entered. And then there was me. From day one, I was the serious one, the bookish one, more interested in achieving things than in getting attention. I had my father's simple brown hair and his quiet, reserved nature. While Chloe sparkled, I blended into the background with my nose in a book. I got straight A's, I joined the debate team, and I spent my weekends buried in homework while Chloe was at sleepovers and parties. Rebecca, why can't you just be a little more like your sister? That question became a constant refrain throughout my childhood. When I'd bring home a report card with perfect marks, my mother would give it a quick look and say, "That's lovely, dear," before immediately pivoting back to Chloe's latest social victory or friendship drama. "Nobody likes a show-off," she'd tell me whenever I tried to share something interesting I'd learned. "Boys don't go for the nerdy types." My father, Robert, was a partner at an accounting firm who worked long hours and hated conflict more than anything. He wasn't overtly cruel the way Eleanor could be, but his quiet passivity was its own form of dismissal. Whenever Eleanor criticized me or held me up against Chloe, he'd just sink deeper into his newspaper or suddenly remember something he needed to fix in the garage. His go-to line was, "Just listen to your mother, Rebecca." The gap in how we were treated just got wider as we got older. When I was 14, I dedicated months of my life to a statewide mathematics competition. The evening I won first place, my parents didn't come to the awards ceremony because they had to be at Chloe's cheerleading tryouts. I stood on that stage by myself, holding my trophy, my eyes scanning the crowd for them, knowing they wouldn't be there. "We're so sorry, Rebecca," my mother said when they got home, her voice completely void of any real apology. "But you know how crucial this was for Chloe's confidence. Besides, you're always so self-sufficient. We knew you'd be okay on your own." That night cemented a hard truth in my mind. My accomplishments would never be a priority in my family. If I wanted to feel proud of what I'd done, I'd have to do it alone. By the time high school rolled around, the roles were set in stone. Chloe would cut class, host parties whenever our parents were out of town, and coasted by with C's, which Eleanor always justified by saying Chloe was developing her people skills. which were apparently so much more important for the real world than grades. In the meantime, I became the editor of the school paper, captain of the debate team, and was chosen for a highly selective youth leadership conference in the state capitol. My mother's reaction? She told me not to get a big head and wondered aloud why I couldn't make time for normal teenage things. The summer before senior year, I got into an intensive pre-law program at Yale for top high school students. It was an incredibly competitive program. Only 20 kids from across the country were selected. When I showed Eleanor the acceptance letter, she barely glanced at it. "That sounds terribly dull. Are you sure you want to spend your entire summer with a bunch of bookworms instead of working on your social life?" That summer at Yale was transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by peers who respected intelligence, drive, and ambition. My opinions were valued, my achievements were celebrated. I met Professor Annabelle Reed, a brilliant constitutional law scholar who became the first adult to ever truly see my potential. "You have an incredible legal mind, Rebecca," she told me after I gave my final presentation. "But more than that, you have the kind of integrity and vision our country desperately needs in its future leaders." I came home feeling a new sense of self-worth, which promptly evaporated the second I walked in the door. Chloe had just been caught with a fake ID trying to get into a bar, but somehow the dinner conversation revolved around how I needed to loosen up and have some fun, like my sister. By the time senior year awards night came, I was resigned to the fact that I'd be celebrating by myself. I was named valedictorian and had won a full scholarship to Northwestern University. At the ceremony, I scanned the audience more out of habit than hope, but then, to my utter shock, I saw my father, sitting by himself in the back. He gave me a quick, almost shy nod when our eyes met. Afterwards, he came up and patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Good work, Rebecca. Your mother and I are, well, I'm proud of you." He cleared his throat and quickly added, "Chloe had a really important callback for a local modeling gig. Your mother took her shopping for an outfit." It wasn't much, but it was the first time a single person in my family had given my success any real weight. That tiny moment of validation was enough to get me through the summer as I packed my bags for college, ready to start my real life, far away from my family's long shadow. Northwestern welcomed me with open arms that August. I showed up on campus with 2 suitcases and a heart full of nervous excitement. Robert and Eleanor dropped me off with as little ceremony as possible, my mother checking her phone the whole time and reminding me they had to get back because Chloe has a big audition tomorrow. The moment their car pulled away, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. For the first time ever, I could just be Rebecca, not Chloe's boring older sister. My roommate, Sarah Jenkins, took one look at my sparse dorm room decor and announced we were going on a shopping trip. "College is your chance to start over," she declared as we browsed the aisles of a department store. "Who do you want to be, Rebecca Hayes?" No one had ever asked me that before. Who did I want to be? Not who should I be to get my mother's approval, or how could I be more like Chloe? Just, who was I? "I want to be someone who makes a difference," I said, the words surprising even me. "Someone who actually matters." Sarah, a political science major from DC with a sharp wit and no time for nonsense, became my first true friend. She pulled me into her study groups, dragged me to parties when I tried to hide in the library, and showed me that you could be both smart and sociable. My academic drive didn't just continue at Northwestern. It thrived in an environment that actually encouraged it. Professors took note of my contributions in class. Classmates sought me out for help with tough concepts. I found my passion in public administration, captivated by how thoughtful policies could genuinely transform communities and better people's lives. The weekly phone calls home became a painful exercise in being invisible. Every Sunday I'd call, and every Sunday the script was the same. "Hi, Mom. How's everyone?" "Oh, Rebecca, you will not believe what happened with Chloe this week." I'd then get a 20-minute monologue about Chloe's latest drama, with my father occasionally chiming in from the background. When Eleanor finally paused, she might ask, "So, how are your classes?" Only to cut me off halfway through my answer with another Chloe story. My trips home for holidays grew more and more strained. Thanksgiving of my freshman year, I came home excited to talk about my application for an internship at the State Department and my acceptance into a prestigious policy fellowship. Eleanor listened for about 30 seconds before turning to Chloe. "Tell Rebecca your big news." Chloe's big news was that she'd dropped out of community college after one semester. She'd been discovered by a so-called talent agent, a sleazy guy named Rick with a bad spray tan, who had promised to make her a star. He'd convinced her to sink her savings into overpriced headshots and acting classes at his studio. When I gently suggested she might want to look into the agency's reputation, Eleanor snapped at me, "Not everyone needs to analyze everything to death, Rebecca." Chloe has a natural gift. She follows her gut, not just her head. By my sophomore year, I stopped talking about my accomplishments with my family altogether. It was easier that way. What was the point? My name on the dean's list, my research paper getting published, my acceptance into a competitive summer program in Washington, D.C. All of it went unmentioned during our brief phone calls. It was during that summer in D.C. that I met Daniel Vance, a law student at Georgetown who was interning at the same policy institute. Daniel was smart, driven, and the first man I'd ever met who seemed more interested in my mind than anything else. Our connection grew over long discussions about policy and late-night walks, debating legal theory. "You think like a natural lawmaker," he told me one night as we stood by the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. "The way you break down problems and build consensus, you could really change things in this country." For my 21st birthday, Daniel drove up to Northwestern to surprise me. He suggested we visit my family that weekend so he could finally meet them. I was hesitant, but I agreed, clinging to a foolish hope that maybe seeing me with Daniel would make them see me differently. The weekend was an absolute train wreck. Eleanor fawned over Daniel, flirting with him and repeatedly saying how shocked she was that I'd managed to find such a handsome, charming boyfriend. Chloe, whose acting career had fizzled out as expected, spent the entire weekend trying to steal Daniel's attention. But the real breaking point came at dinner. Eleanor turned to Daniel and said, "Daniel, you seem so accomplished. What on earth do you see in our Rebecca? She's always been the serious, studious one." Daniel looked genuinely confused. "Rebecca is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. Her professors think she could be running the country one day." Eleanor let out a loud laugh, as if he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. "Our Rebecca? In politics? Oh, that's rich. She doesn't have the personality for that, not like Chloe does." The drive back to campus was silent. 2 weeks later, Daniel ended things, saying he wasn't ready for a serious relationship, but I knew the real reason. He had seen the toxic dynamic of my family and wanted no part of it. I couldn't even be mad at him. That breakup was a catalyst. I buried myself in my studies with a fierce new resolve. If my family was never going to see my worth, then I would build a life so successful that their opinion would become completely irrelevant. I applied and was accepted to Yale Law School, following the path my mentor, Professor Reed, had paved. Law school was both grueling and incredibly validating. I thrived on the challenge, graduating in the top 5% of my class. I clerked for a federal judge, then took a job at the district attorney's office, all while building a network of colleagues and mentors who respected my work ethic and intellect. During these years, my contact with my family shrunk to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional brief visit. Eleanor was always bailing Chloe out of some new mess, from a failed online boutique to a string of bad relationships. My father faded even further into the background, sometimes calling me separately to ask stiff, formal questions about my career that showed he had no real grasp of what I actually did. My professional success grew in direct proportion to my emotional distance from my family. I built a new family of my own, made up of friends and mentors who celebrated my wins and supported me through setbacks. Sarah remained my closest friend, now a successful political strategist in Chicago, and she was constantly pushing me to run for office. "You have what it takes, Beck," she'd insist during our weekly calls, "the brains, the integrity, the work ethic. People like you are the ones who are supposed to be in public service." When I was 28, I finally took her advice. I started by volunteering for a state Senate campaign, quickly going from an envelope stuffer to a policy advisor. The candidate, Senator Evelyn Davis, saw my potential and took me under her wing. When she won, she offered me a job as her legislative director. That position became the launch pad for my entire political career, though I had no idea at the time just how high it would take me. My job with Senator Davis opened doors I had never even dreamed of. As her legislative director, I was drafting policies that were making a real difference in people's lives. We expanded healthcare coverage for low-income children, passed new environmental regulations, and funded job training programs that brought life back to struggling towns. For the first time, I could see the direct line between my analytical mind and tangible positive outcomes for real people. After 2 years, Senator Davis pushed me to step into the spotlight myself. "Rebecca, you're the one who should be running," she told me over coffee one morning. "You have the vision, the intellect, and surprisingly sharp political instincts for someone who overthinks every single thing." I laughed at her friendly jab, but the idea had already taken hold. When a state assembly seat opened up in a district near my apartment, I decided to go for it. The campaign was an exhausting, exhilarating, and terrifying blur. I knocked on thousands of doors, sat through countless community forums, and survived on 18-hour days, all while learning how to connect with voters on a personal level. And to my own surprise, I was good at it. Not in the flashy, charming way that Chloe had, but in a quiet, authentic way that resonated with people who were tired of empty political rhetoric. I listened to their problems, offered concrete solutions, and never patronized them. People seemed to respond to my genuine interest in their lives and my detailed grasp of the issues. When I won the election, I called my parents, still foolishly hoping this win might finally get their attention. My father answered, sounding distracted. "That's nice, Rebecca," he said after I told him the news. "Hang on, your mother wants to talk." Eleanor got on the line, barely acknowledging my victory before diving into the latest Chloe drama. My sister had started a high-end dog-walking business that was now completely bankrupt, leaving her in a mountain of debt. "We had to take out a second mortgage to help her," Eleanor explained, her tone accusatory. "Now that you have this steady government job, maybe you could contribute something to help your sister out." I was speechless. Not one word of congratulations, not a hint of pride, just another demand that I clean up Chloe's mess. I politely refused, explaining that state assembly members don't actually make very much, and hung up the phone feeling completely empty. Despite my family's total indifference, my political career took off. I earned a reputation for my policy knowledge, my tireless work ethic, and my integrity. I sponsored successful bills on education reform, infrastructure, and government ethics. When it was time for re-election, I won in a landslide. My work was so all-consuming that it gave me the perfect excuse to distance myself even further from my family. I missed holidays because of legislative sessions. I sent birthday gifts instead of attending parties. Eleanor would occasionally call to complain about my absence, but the conversations always circled back to Chloe's latest supposed triumph. "Your sister is dating a surgeon now," she'd announce proudly. Or, "Chloe's starting a new wellness brand. It sounds very promising." The fact that Chloe's relationships always ended in flames, or that her business ideas consistently crashed and burned, never seemed to shake Eleanor's faith in her potential. Meanwhile, my actual achievements were treated as strange hobbies at best, or character flaws at worst. 3 years into my term in the assembly, I was approached by party leadership about running for the state senate. The incumbent was retiring, and they saw me as the best candidate to hold the seat. I hesitated, knowing that the increased public profile would make it much harder to keep my professional and family lives separate. "You can't keep hiding your light, Rebecca," Sarah told me when I voiced my concerns. "You're doing important work. Your family's opinion doesn't change that." So I ran. I won a tough primary and then the general election. At 32, I became the youngest state senator in Northwood's history. It was another milestone that went completely unacknowledged by the people who raised me. That Christmas, feeling a sense of obligation, I drove to my parents' house armed with carefully chosen presents and a firm resolve to keep all conversations light and superficial. The evening was going smoothly enough, with my father asking me vague questions about my work that I answered with equal vagueness. Eleanor was even being almost friendly, right up until she'd had a couple of glasses of wine. "So, Rebecca," she said as we sat in the living room after dinner, "I ran into Carol Wilson and she said you're thinking about running for governor next year. Please tell me that's just a rumor." I was taken aback. I had been having very private, preliminary talks with party leaders about a potential run, but nothing was public. "I'm exploring my options for how I can best continue my public service," I answered cautiously. Eleanor let out that dismissive laugh I knew so well. "Oh, Rebecca, always so ambitious. Don't you think you're getting a little ahead of yourself? The governorship is for serious, experienced politicians, not idealistic girls playing at government." "I am a serious politician, Mother," I replied, my voice miraculously steady despite the old, familiar sting of her words. "Well, I think it's just wonderful that you found something to keep you busy," she said, patting my hand in that condescending way of hers. "But maybe you should focus on something more realistic. You could help your sister with her new lifestyle brand. She could really use someone with your organizational skills." I looked at my father, hoping for even a flicker of support, but he was suddenly deeply engrossed in the football game playing on mute on the television. "Actually," Chloe chimed in, "the brand is going to be huge. I already have investors lining up." This was the first I was hearing of any lifestyle brand, but it had all the hallmarks of Chloe's past ventures: big dreams, fuzzy details, and an inevitable financial implosion. I left early that night, driving home through a light snow, my mother's words echoing in my head: delusional, playing at government. The old doubt started to creep in, that quiet voice that whispered I would never be good enough, never worthy of their praise. But something was different this time. As I drove, my thoughts shifted away from my family's opinion and toward the single mother I had helped get health care for her son, the Army veteran whose pension I'd fought to restore, the students in underfunded schools who now had new computers because of a bill I had championed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my decision was made. I was going to run for governor. Not to prove anything to my family, but because I truly believed I could make a difference for the people of my state. And this time, I wouldn't even bother seeking their approval or even their awareness. I would keep my political life and my family life completely, totally separate. The next morning, I called the party chairman and told him I was in. The race for governor was about to start, and it was going to change everything, just not in the way I ever could have predicted. Deciding to run for governor wasn't a choice I made casually. At 33, I knew I'd be one of the youngest candidates in state history, and definitely the youngest woman. The campaign would be a brutal fight, with my opponents attacking my experience, my age, and my gender. What I didn't see coming was how freeing it would feel to chase this goal without a single thought about my family's approval. My campaign team was small but fiercely loyal, led by Sarah, who took a leave of absence from her consulting job to be my campaign manager. We were outfunded, outstaffed, and completely written off by the political establishment. The incumbent lieutenant governor, Richard Monroe, was the clear front runner with name recognition, the party machine behind him, and a massive campaign fund. "They're underestimating you," Sarah said after a particularly condescending article about my campaign was published in the state's biggest newspaper. "We're going to use that." And we did. We ran a completely different kind of campaign. While Monroe was holding $1,000 a plate dinners with corporate donors, I was hosting town halls in high school gyms, libraries, and community centers all across the state. I listened more than I talked. I answered every question directly and honestly, even when the truth wasn't politically convenient. I put out detailed, specific policy plans instead of offering vague platitudes. And slowly, something amazing started to happen. The crowds at our events got bigger. Volunteers started showing up in droves. Small dollar donations poured in from regular people who connected with our message of practical, progressive government that focused on improving their everyday lives. The media finally started to take notice when our poll numbers began to climb. Hayes's surge shocks political insiders, one headline read. Dark horse candidate closing the gap in governor's race, read another. Monroe's campaign fought back with attack ads, questioning my youth and inexperience. His surrogates went on TV and questioned whether a childless single woman could possibly understand family values. One ad was particularly nasty, suggesting I was a radical who would bankrupt the state with my progressive policies. Instead of slinging mud back, I challenged Monroe to a series of televised debates on the issues. To everyone's surprise, he accepted. Those debates were the turning point. Monroe was slick and well-rehearsed, sticking to his talking points, but he faltered when pressed on policy details. I showed up armed with data, facts, and specific, actionable plans. When he attacked me personally, I pivoted back to the issues that actually mattered to voters. The difference between us was stark. After the final debate, the state's largest newspaper endorsed my campaign, calling me a rare political talent who combines intellectual rigor with genuine compassion and a pragmatic vision. Throughout this entire whirlwind, I kept my family completely in the dark. When Eleanor called with updates on Chloe's life, I listened patiently and gave vague answers when she asked what I was up to. They moved in circles where state politics was just background noise. Election night arrived, and the polls had us in a statistical dead heat. My team and I gathered in a hotel ballroom downtown, our eyes glued to the screens as the results slowly trickled in. The early returns favored Monroe, but as the night wore on, my numbers surged in urban centers and rural areas where my economic message had hit home. By midnight, the race was still too close to call. Sarah told me to get some sleep, but I was too wired, too invested. We all huddled around laptops, tracking every precinct, analyzing every vote count. At 3:42 a.m., the Associated Press called the race. I had won by just over 20,000 votes out of nearly 2 million cast. The ballroom exploded. Staffers were hugging, crying, and screaming. Sarah threw her arms around me. "You did it, Governor. You actually did it." In that moment of pure elation, I felt a strange, hollow space where family congratulations should have been. I had just achieved something incredible, defied every odd, and there was no one from my childhood there to see it. No proud parents, no supportive sister, just the colleagues and friends who knew me only as the driven, capable politician, not the girl who was never quite good enough. The inauguration 2 months later was a blur of ceremonies, speeches, and administrative duties. Sarah had organized it all perfectly, from the understated ceremony on the Capitol steps to a reception that highlighted local food and artists. I wore a simple navy suit, took the oath of office with my hand on the state constitution, and gave an inaugural address that focused on unity, opportunity, and shared purpose. The crowd that day was filled with old professors, college friends, political mentors, and thousands of ordinary citizens who had believed in my improbable campaign. But my mother, my father, and my sister weren't there. I had sent them formal invitations, of course, but I'd received polite formal regrets citing prior commitments. It stung, but I was determined not to let their absence tarnish the day. My first 6 months as governor were every bit as challenging as I'd imagined. I put together a diverse and talented cabinet, battled with the legislature to pass an ambitious budget, and launched new initiatives on education and healthcare. The job took up every waking minute, which was fine by me. Work had always been my escape from family disappointment. Sarah, now my chief of staff, was the only person brave enough to bring up my family. "Have you thought about just reaching out to them, Beck?" she asked one night as we were going over briefing documents. "Letting them know what you've accomplished?" "What's the point?" I replied, not looking up. My mother would just find a way to dismiss it or make it about Chloe. My father would nod and change the subject. "Maybe," Sarah said gently, "or maybe they'd surprise you. People can rise to the occasion if you give them the chance." I changed the subject, refusing to entertain the fantasy that my family might suddenly see me differently after 30-plus years of indifference. 3 weeks later, that choice was taken away from me. My executive assistant, Jennifer, interrupted a budget meeting with an urgent message. "Governor, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that needs your immediate attention," she said, handing me a manila folder. "Your sister has been arrested." I opened the folder and found a police report. Chloe had been arrested for fraud and embezzlement. Apparently, her lifestyle brand had been less about wellness and more about taking money from investors that then vanished into thin air. Several well-known local business owners had filed complaints, which triggered an investigation. The district attorney was moving forward with charges, and Chloe's arraignment was set for the following week. Tucked inside the folder was a confidential memo from the DA, informing me of the situation as a courtesy given my position. My first instinct was to have nothing to do with it. As governor, I had no authority over the courts, but even the slightest appearance of impropriety could be disastrous. But I couldn't just ignore it. This was my sister. After long discussions with my legal counsel, I decided on a course of action that walked the line between my ethical obligations and basic family duty. I would attend the arraignment, but as a private citizen, not in any official capacity. I would have no contact with the judge or the prosecutors. I would just be there, in the back, observing like anyone else. What I didn't realize was that this decision was about to trigger the most explosive family confrontation of my life, in the most public forum I could possibly imagine. The morning of Chloe's arraignment, I dressed to be invisible. Jeans, a simple blouse, a cardigan, minimal makeup, and my hair in a ponytail. I wanted to blend into the background, to be just another person in the courtroom, not the governor of the state. My security team was not happy about it, but they adapted, sending 2 plainclothes officers to sit discreetly in the courthouse. I got there early, slipped in through a side door, and found a seat in the last row. Almost no one gave me a second look. The courtroom slowly filled up with the usual morning docket of tired-looking defendants and their lawyers. I saw my parents come in about 15 minutes before Chloe's case was called. Eleanor looked perfect, as always, but I could see the stress in the tight set of her jaw. Robert trailed behind her, his shoulders slumped in his usual posture of weary resignation. They sat near the front, completely oblivious to me in the back. A few minutes later, a side door opened and Chloe was led in by her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. My sister looked pale and thin, her usual bubbly confidence replaced by a raw, visible fear. The presiding judge that morning was Judge Michael Sterling, a man with a reputation for being tough but fair. He moved through the docket with brisk efficiency. When the clerk called out, "The Commonwealth versus Chloe Hayes," my sister and her lawyer walked to the front. The prosecutor, a young man in a crisp suit, stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with 3 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of embezzlement, related to the solicitation of funds for a business enterprise that appears to have been a vehicle for personal enrichment." The prosecutor detailed the allegations. Chloe had collected over $500,000 from investors for a wellness brand that never actually existed, using the money for luxury travel, designer clothes, and to pay off old debts. As he spoke, I could see Eleanor getting more and more agitated, whispering frantically to Robert and then to Chloe's lawyer. Judge Sterling noticed it too. He fixed my mother with a cold stare. "Ma'am, you will refrain from disrupting my courtroom." Eleanor, who was not used to being spoken to that way, straightened up indignantly. I'm the defendant's mother, Your Honor, and this is all a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter is an entrepreneur who just ran into some business challenges. Judge Sterling's expression hardened. Ma'am, this is not a business meeting. This is an arraignment. He then asked Chloe how she pleaded. Not guilty, Your Honor, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The prosecutor requested bail be set at $100,000, citing Chloe's lack of stable employment and a history of moving frequently as a flight risk. Her lawyer argued for her to be released on her own recognizance, pointing to her community ties. I sat there silently, torn between a flicker of sympathy for my sister's terror and the cold recognition that she had to finally face the music for her actions. This was the inevitable end of a pattern my parents had enabled for her entire life. As Judge Sterling was considering the bail arguments, a court officer walked up and whispered something in his ear. The judge's eyebrows shot up. He scanned the back of the courtroom, and his eyes, with surprising accuracy, landed directly on me. And then came the moment that changed everything. Judge Sterling looked right at me and said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent room, Governor Hayes, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us today. While this is a public proceeding, it is customary to notify the court of your presence. The courtroom went dead quiet. Every single head swiveled in my direction. I saw faces contort in shock, confusion, and dawning recognition. Eleanor's mouth fell open, her carefully constructed mask of composure shattering as she stared at me in pure disbelief. Robert looked like he'd been physically struck. Chloe's already pale face went completely white. I'm here as a private citizen, Your Honor, I managed to say, my voice steady despite the frantic pounding in my chest. My presence is personal, not official. Judge Sterling nodded. The court acknowledges your attendance. We will proceed. What he really meant was that he would now be meticulously careful to show no favoritism or bias in a case involving the governor's sister. His professionalism was admirable, but the damage, or maybe the revelation, was done. Eleanor had recovered enough to twist around in her seat, her eyes boring into me with a look that cycled through shock, confusion, and a deep, cutting sense of betrayal. The rest of the proceeding was a blur. The judge set bail, and as my security detail sensed the shift in the room, they moved closer to me. The moment court was adjourned, a local news reporter who had been there for another case made a beeline for me. Governor Hayes, are you here in connection with the fraud case against Chloe Hayes? More reporters seemed to materialize out of nowhere. My security detail's posture shifted from casual to protective. The defendant is my sister, I said, knowing a denial would only make things worse. I attended today as a family member, not in my official capacity. I will have no further comment on an ongoing legal matter. Eleanor looked as if I'd just slapped her. Sister? You admit she's your sister, but you kept this from us? How could you? The courtroom had descended into a circus. My security team had had enough. Ma'am, we need to get you to a secure location, the lead agent said firmly. I nodded, then turned to Eleanor. This isn't the place. I'll meet you privately. As my team hustled me towards a private exit, I caught one last glimpse of Chloe being led away, her face a mask of confusion. Robert was just standing there in the middle of the chaos, looking lost and suddenly very, very old. The judge's words had ripped apart the careful wall I had built between my two lives. Now those worlds were set to collide, and I had no idea how I would survive the fallout. The scene outside the courthouse was pure chaos. Word had spread like wildfire that the governor's sister was facing felony fraud charges, and the press had descended. Camera crews swarmed the courthouse steps, and reporters shouted questions into the air. My security detail, now in full protective mode, rushed me toward a side exit where an unmarked SUV was waiting. Governor, we need to return to the Capitol immediately, said Michael, the head of my security team. This situation is becoming unpredictable. I stopped in my tracks. No, I need to speak with my family. Can you get us a private room here in the courthouse? Michael looked pained, but he nodded. We can request a conference room, but I strongly advise against staying here any longer than necessary. Understood, I said. Please make it happen, and have someone bring my parents and sister there once she's released. 20 minutes later, I was sitting alone in a sterile conference room waiting. I had already called Sarah to give her a heads up, and she was already in damage control mode, drafting a statement that confirmed my relationship to the defendant while stressing the independence of the justice system. The door flew open and Eleanor stormed in, her usual poise completely gone. Robert followed, looking dazed, with Chloe and her lawyer right behind him. "Would you like me to stay for this, Ms. Hayes?" the lawyer asked Chloe. "No, Rachel." "This is family," Chloe said, her voice strained, "but stay close." As soon as the door clicked shut, Eleanor exploded. "Governor? Governor, how could you hide something like this from your own family? Were you laughing at us this whole time, Rebecca, enjoying your big secret while we were all in the dark?" I took a steadying breath, determined to stay calm. "I wasn't laughing at anyone, Mother. My career has been a matter of public record. I've been on the news, in televised debates, giving speeches. It wasn't a secret. It was just something you never bothered to pay attention to. Don't you dare try to turn this on us," Eleanor shot back. "You deliberately hid this from us. Your own father didn't even know his daughter was the governor of his state." Robert, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Why, Rebecca? Why wouldn't you tell us?" His question, asked with genuine hurt instead of anger, broke through my defenses in a way Eleanor's rage never could. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw the deep confusion in his eyes. "Because it wouldn't have made a difference," I said softly. "Or worse, it would have only mattered because of the title, not because of me or the work I did." "That's ridiculous," Eleanor protested. "Of course we would have been proud." "Would you have?" I asked, years of bottled-up frustration finally bubbling to the surface. "When I was elected to the state assembly, I called to tell you. You gave me 2 minutes before changing the subject to Chloe's latest crisis. When I became a state senator, you asked if I could use my position to get Chloe's parking tickets dismissed. You've spent my entire life writing off my ambitions as boring or irrelevant." "That's not true," Eleanor insisted, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "It is true," I said, my voice gaining strength. "When I told you I was considering a run for governor, you called me delusional. You said it was for serious politicians, not idealistic girls playing at government." "Those were your exact words, Mother." Eleanor's face flushed with color. She clearly remembered. "I was just trying to protect you from being disappointed." "No. You were doing what you've always done, diminishing me to elevate Chloe. So I stopped trying to win your approval. I built my career, I ran my campaign, and I won the election, all without you. And you know what? It felt liberating." Chloe, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "So this was all just to get back at us? You became governor just to prove us wrong." I turned to my sister, and to my surprise, I felt a wave of compassion. "No, Chloe. This had nothing to do with you. I became governor because I care about public service and I thought I could make a difference. My decision to keep it from you wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation." "Then why are you here today?" Chloe demanded. "To gloat? To use your power to make sure I go to jail? Is that honestly what you think of me?" I asked, the accusation genuinely stinging. "I'm here because no matter what, you are my sister." I wanted to understand what was going on and see if there was any appropriate way I could help. Not by interfering with the law, I would never do that, but as a family member. "If you really wanted to help, you could make all this disappear," Eleanor jumped in. "Surely the governor has that kind of power." I just stared at her dumbfounded. "That is exactly why I kept my job a secret from you. What you're asking me to do isn't just unethical, it's illegal. I took an oath to uphold the law, not to break it for my own family." So you're just going to do nothing while your sister's life is ruined? Eleanor pressed. I will do nothing to interfere with the legal process, I clarified. But that doesn't mean I can't support Chloe in the right ways. I can help her find the best legal counsel. I can encourage her to be honest and show remorse. I can be there for her as a sister. What I cannot and will not do is abuse my office to get her special treatment. The room was silent as my words sank in. Robert looked pensive, while Eleanor seemed caught between her anger and the dawning horror that her usual tactics weren't going to work. But it was Chloe's reaction that surprised me the most. She sank into a chair, all the fight going out of her. You really are the governor, she said quietly, as if the reality was just hitting her. Yes, I said simply. And you're not going to use your power to get me out of this. No. Chloe nodded slowly. That's actually respectable. She looked up at me, and for the first time, it felt like she was really seeing me. I always thought you were the boring one, the goody two-shoes, but you were building something real while I was just chasing easy fixes. Eleanor wasn't giving up. This is absurd. Family helps family, Rebecca. That's the rule. No, Mother, I said, standing my ground. What you've done is enable Chloe's worst instincts for her entire life. You've bailed her out of every problem, excused every bad decision, and taught her that the rules don't apply to her. And look where that's gotten her. Eleanor gasped, but I kept going. Real help is about helping people grow and learn from their mistakes, not shielding them from the consequences of their actions. I can support Chloe through this, but I will not interfere with it. Robert stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Eleanor's arm. Eleanor, stop! Just stop for a minute and listen. He turned to me, his face a mixture of regret and something that looked like pride. I owe you an apology, Rebecca. A lot of them. I let your mother's favoritism go on for decades. I saw what was happening to both of you, and I said nothing. That makes me just as responsible. His words stunned me into silence. In all the ways I had imagined this confrontation playing out, I had never once pictured genuine remorse from either of my parents. You did all of this on your own, he continued, without any support or encouragement from us. That says a lot about your character, Rebecca, and it says a lot about our failures as parents. Eleanor looked betrayed by his words, but his tone was firm enough to keep her quiet. I'd like to speak with Chloe alone, I said after a moment. Just us. Eleanor started to object, but Robert took her arm. Come on, Eleanor, let them talk. He guided my mother to the door, then paused and looked back at me. For what it's worth, Rebecca, I'm so proud of what you've done. I just wish I had been there to see it. After they left, Chloe and I sat in silence. The sister I had resented, envied, and avoided for most of my life now looked so small and fragile. So what happens now? She finally asked. Now you face this honestly, I said. You get a good lawyer, you cooperate, and you take responsibility for what you did. And then I go to prison. That will depend on a lot of things, including whether you can pay back the investors. But Chloe, this doesn't have to be the end of your life. It can be a turning point. She looked doubtful. Easy for you to say. You're the governor with a perfect life. I let out a short, humorless laugh. My life is far from perfect. I work 14-hour days. I face constant public scrutiny. And until today, I had zero relationship with my family. But I have a purpose. And that matters more than perfection. We talked for another hour, the first real conversation we'd had as adults. She told me about the financial desperation that led her to make such terrible choices, and I told her about my long journey in politics. We didn't fix everything, not by a long shot, but we laid the foundation for something new. When we walked out of the conference room, the media mob had doubled. Reporters shouted questions as my security team cleared a path. But instead of running, I made a decision. I walked right up to the line of cameras. I will make a brief statement, I announced. Chloe stood just behind me, looking terrified but resolute. Today, I attended my sister Chloe Hayes' arraignment as a private citizen and family member. While I acknowledge our relationship, I want to be perfectly clear. The judicial process will move forward without any interference or influence from my office. Ms. Hayes will be treated exactly the same under the law as any other citizen of this state. I paused. On a personal level, I believe in both justice and compassion. I believe in accountability and the possibility of redemption. These are not contradictory ideas. They are the bedrock of our legal system and our human relationships. Thank you. As we turned to leave, a reporter yelled, "Governor Hayes, why did you keep your family in the dark about your career?" I turned back one last time. Some journeys have to be walked alone before they can be shared. Today marks a new chapter for my family, one of honesty and hopefully, in time, one of healing. With that, I left the courthouse, having finally shattered the silence that had both protected and imprisoned me for so long. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it included the possibility of a real family, built on truth instead of secrets. 6 months after the courtroom bombshell, I stood at my office window in the governor's mansion, watching the autumn leaves drift across the lawn. So much had changed. Chloe had pleaded guilty to lesser charges after agreeing to full restitution and cooperation. Her sentence involved probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. The judge had taken note of her genuine remorse. What amazed me most was how Chloe had thrown herself into her own rehabilitation. She was now working for a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated women re-enter the workforce, using her natural charm for a good cause. We were meeting twice a month for family therapy sessions with a Dr. Weber, slowly untangling the toxic dynamics of our childhood. "I spent my whole life thinking I was special," Chloe confessed in one session. "Mom made me feel like the rules were for other people, that I was entitled to success without work. I never learned how to be resilient because I never had to face a single real consequence. And I spent my life believing I was fundamentally flawed," I had responded, "that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough to make me worthy of their attention." Dr. Weber helped us see how our mother's parenting had broken both of us in different ways. Chloe was set up for failure by being overpraised and overprotected, while I was driven to overachievement by the promise of an approval that never came. Eleanor herself was on a much slower path to self-awareness. After the initial shock, she had retreated into angry denial. But it was our father who had truly initiated the change. "I enabled your mother's behavior for decades," he admitted during a tense family dinner. "I saw what was happening to both of you, and I chose to do nothing." That makes me equally to blame. His honesty had cracked open a window. Eleanor still struggled, but she was trying. Last month, she had called me, something she hadn't done in years. The conversation was stilted, but it was progress. "I saw your speech on the news about education funding," she said stiffly. You spoke well." Coming from her, it was the highest praise. "Thank you, Mother," I'd replied, accepting the small offering for what it was. A knock on my office door brought me back to the present. Jennifer walked in with a stack of files. "The Budget Committee will be here in 20 minutes, Governor," she said, "and your sister called." She confirmed dinner at her place tonight at 7. I smiled. The novelty of having regular family dinners on my calendar still hadn't worn off. That evening's dinner was at Chloe's new, modest apartment. Robert arrived with a homemade lasagna. Eleanor brought an expensive bottle of wine and a thinly veiled look of judgment about Chloe's smaller living space. "This neighborhood certainly has potential," she commented, which for her was an act of incredible restraint. Chloe's 12-year-old daughter, Sophia, who lived mostly with her dad, was helping serve. She had always been a little shy around me, but lately that had shifted to open admiration. "Aunt Rebecca, can I interview you for my school project?" she asked as we ate. "We're supposed to talk to someone who makes a difference in the community." "She's very busy, Sophia," Eleanor interjected automatically. In the past, I would have let it go. Tonight, I put down my fork. Actually, I would be honored to help with your project, I said firmly, looking right at my mother. Public service is about being accessible to everyone, especially the young people who are our future. Eleanor blinked, unused to being contradicted, but she nodded. Of course. I just meant, you have such a demanding schedule. I always have time for family, I replied, the words feeling both strange and true. Sophia beamed. Mom says you're her role model now, she whispered, ignoring Chloe's embarrassed hushing from across the table. Your mom is my role model for courage, I said, meeting Chloe's eyes. She's showing incredible strength right now. Later, as Robert and I did the dishes, my father spoke quietly. You know, I spent 40 years of my life avoiding conflict, he said, carefully drying a glass. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just protecting a broken system. It's never too late to change, Dad, I replied, the word dad still feeling new on my tongue after a lifetime of the more formal father. He nodded. I watch you on TV making these tough calls, facing down critics. I always wondered where you got that courage. It certainly wasn't from me. Maybe it was, I suggested. Maybe watching you avoid conflict taught me how high the cost of silence can be. He mulled that over. I guess sometimes we parent best by negative example. Still, I'm sorry you had to find your own voice without my help. Driving back to the governor's mansion that night, I thought about the incredible journey of the last year. The family I had run from was slowly, painstakingly becoming a family I might actually want to be a part of. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. How was family night? I smiled as I typed back. Imperfect, awkward, real, progress. Her reply was instant. The best kind. The truth was, the public revelation I had feared for so long had been the most liberating event of my life. I was no longer the disappointing daughter in one life and the accomplished governor in another. I was just me. More importantly, I had finally stopped looking for validation from people who were incapable of giving it. My worth wasn't tied to my mother's approval or my father's late-blooming pride. It came from within, from using my skills to serve others and staying true to my own values. The biggest lesson was that true success isn't about proving your critics wrong. It's about becoming fully and unapologetically yourself. I had spent so long hiding my own light, first to avoid criticism and then to avoid confrontation. Now I understood that being seen, while sometimes uncomfortable, creates possibility. Not just for me, but for others who might see a part of themselves in my story. I thought of Sophia wanting to interview me. Maybe that was the real victory. The cycle of dysfunction that had defined my family for so long might finally be breaking. The next morning, I would be back to the business of governing, but I would do it as a whole person, no longer split in two. The road ahead with my family would still be bumpy, but we were finally walking it together. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years. No longer the family failure or the secret success, just Rebecca, imperfect and finally whole. Have you ever felt like you had to hide your success from a family that just didn't believe in you? Or have you ever had that moment when someone who always dismissed you finally saw you for who you are? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by anyone else's approval. Remember, sometimes the people who are supposed to see you most clearly are the ones who can't, but that never diminishes your light. Thank you for listening. End of story.